to do your will, but I confess that it was in my strength and not in yours, as if success could be assured. But your perfect will allowed suffering, and now broken pieces I see. So I will trust that in your time I will learn your why. And you speak redemption over me in ways I cannot always see. You breathe new life again and bring suffering to an end, as only you can. And in its place you make a way for me to glorify your name. You make all things new and my hope is found in you. I give my heart to you. You speak redemption over me. It's been a long road, but I'm here, and you have taught me through tears that in the pits you lead me through. My redemption's in you. You speak redemption over me in ways I cannot always see. You breathe new life again and bring suffering to an end, as only you can. And in its place you will make a way for me to glorify your name. You make all things new and my hope is found in you. I give my heart to you, and you speak redemption over me in ways
Well, good evening. I trust that everybody is doing well and staying warm in this winter wonderland where we are living. It is cold outside. Before we get started, I do want to, with a little bit of housekeeping, thank Brother Tim Canalito and Brother Gary Troppy and Brother John Rains, all for taking their time to be up here today and make sure that everything was winterproofed up at the church. I think that everything is okay. With Sister Teddy's help with that Michigan experience, we were able to cover the roses in the front, and so hopefully those will be all right. We have the pipes and stuff lined up, worked on something with the sprinklers, so prayerfully everything will be okay here, and I hope that all of your homes are winterized and safe for this beautiful, beautiful winter wonderland. It is, as I said, cold outside. So if you or if things come forward and you need some help or something goes wrong with the heater at your house or something, please let me know. We want to try to do whatever we can to help, but prayerfully we will just be able to all hunker down and enjoy a little bit of time warm and inside. Although the heater is working okay in the office, I do want this coffee. All right. Well, we are ready to get rolling. Whatever prayer requests you may have, please let me know. I'll mention the ones that we had this morning. I'm so sorry, I've forgotten his name. Fantastic's grandson. but he'll be having that pacemaker put in this week, and only 2 years old. And so we certainly want to be in prayer for him. We are grateful for the good report that Sister Gail is doing better, but want to ask to continue being in prayer for her. Sister Mary Fox has got several unspoken prayer requests, so be in prayer for her as well. I'm not aware of any more right offhand. So whatever prayer requests you have, please let me know there in the chat, and we will lift those up to the Lord together. We are collecting candy for Easter, so please be bringing some of that up as you're able. We've got some baskets in the foyer. We are going to, if things go well, have the Easter egg hunt with the resurrection eggs that tell the Easter story here. If things went bad, then we would make a change and do a delivery or something like that. Oh, thank you, Sister Julie. His name was Isaiah Royal. Or is Isaiah Royal. So we certainly want to be in prayer for him. The other announcements, City Reach, really need everybody signed up by next week. It's supposed to have a $100 deposit. If that's a problem, just let us know. The total cost will be $300, and we are looking forward to going to Bentonville, Arkansas. If you have any questions, Sister Musi Troppi is the one to talk to about that. She's heading up the organization of that trip, and I sure appreciate her taking the lead on that. She's done a lot of work already, communicating with the kids, gathering information, making sign-up sheets. She's really running with it, and I really appreciate that. It's not her fault that I'm only telling you about it shortly before the stuff is due. It just really crept up on us, and it wasn't clear until pretty recently that they were going to be able to have it or what things were going to be like. And so we're excited about that and looking forward to that. Our Friday Bible study continues in the educational building. Somebody told me last week that they invited someone who comes to church and says they had never heard about it. And so I'm telling you about it now. I think I say it pretty regularly in the announcements, but I'm telling you now that we do at 10 a.m. We have a Bible study on Fridays in the education building, the old sanctuary. Brother Paul and I have been taking turns teaching that. I think that Brother John Rains has expressed some interest in teaching it some, and Brother Russell, as his family situation changes, would like to go back to teaching as well. So we'll kind of rotate through on that. Let's see. If you have prayer requests, then share those in the chat. I think that's it for announcements. Really, City Reach and candy for Easter are the big things coming up. Brother Sean Druitt will be here in June. Obviously, he was not here this morning. I just called him yesterday and told him that it really didn't make much sense for him to drive all the way here from Monroe and have to drive back in the bad weather and not know how many people would even be here to take up a love offering to make it worth his trip. Thanks to Sister Julie's tireless efforts, we were able to reschedule his hotel and stuff and not have to lose out on that, which was a nice surprise too. I don't see any more prayer requests. Oh, hey, is it popping in now? Here we go. Mom says, my friend Karen from Richwood's husband has COVID. That is John Jones is his name. He suffers from a lot of respiratory issues already, so she's very concerned. So certainly be in prayer for Brother John down there. Sister Melinda, continue to pray for her and Meredith. God knows the details of what's going on with that. We'll certainly keep you in our prayers. Sister Vicky, all the homeless in this weather? Yes. As far as I know, the police department was able to pick everybody up and get everybody somewhere. I contacted the church that's in the Old Opry that is hosting some people and asked them if they needed more space or volunteers or resources, and said, we wanted to do whatever we could to help. Got some cots in case that was necessary with this kind of once in a lifetime cold weather. And they said that right now they have all the space they expect to need. I left my phone number with the pastor there, and so if things change and we need to do something, then we'll be able to. Not if we need to gather supplies for them or whatever, then I'll send out a message on Flock Notes. But as of right now, the church there in the Old Opry and Legacy Church, I think is what it's called, on 517. They do a lot of work with the homeless population already, and so they already had some relationships there too. So they were. It looks like things are taken care of, which is good news. A little. We would like to have been able to help, but I'm glad that the need is being handled. But certainly, this is a fatal type situation that people here are just not equipped to deal with. Sister Melinda, I have a student who's suffering. God knows her needs, so we'll pray for this student as well. Any other prayer requests? All right, I don't see any. We've got some lag, so if you have some, then just let me know, and we will lift those up to the Lord too. But for right now, let's open up with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father God, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the homes that we have, for the warmth that we have, for the church members who have been able to take in other people in our church family during this time to protect them and provide for them in this weather. God, I ask that you'd keep us safe, that you would watch over those that don't have somewhere to go and care for them, put the right people in their path that they need. God, I ask that you'd be with these that are going through major life challenges, these unspoken prayer requests for Sister Mary and Sister Melinda. God, I ask for these that are sick, Brother John Jones, Sister Gail Bryant, God, and that whole family with all the many things they have going on as well. Father, you know this unspoken situation as well with Sister Melinda's student, and I pray that you would be with her too. I pray, God, that for those that have to be on the road, whether for work or that have to get home tonight in this weather, that are just not used to it, that you'd protect them and guide them as well. Father, I pray now that as we open up your word, that you would give us wisdom to understand it, that you'd give us soft hearts to be transformed by it, and you'd give us mouths that are quick to praise you for it. And I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get rolling. We're in Isaiah or in Ezekiel tonight. Exodus. That's the second book of the Bible, Justin. You ought to really be familiar with it. The what we started on last time were the plagues, and tonight we're going to deal with the 10th plague. So there were 5 plagues, and then that affected everybody. And then there were 4 plagues that only affected the Egyptians. They did not affect those in the land of Goshen. Many of our friends who believe in a mid-tribulational rapture will use that as an example to say, look, the first half of the plagues affected everyone, and the second half of the plagues that became more intense, leading up, of course, to the death of the firstborn, only affected those who were not part of the family of God. And so that's an interesting argument. There is that distinction that it seems that there are some levels of suffering that are endemic to being in the world, that are endemic to being human beings, but then there are certain levels of suffering that God oftentimes protects us from. Maybe not always, but the Israelites were protected even in the midst of the plagues, even when they were in Egypt. So these plagues have been escalating. And as I argued before, these plagues really attack the different Egyptian gods. They worshipped the Nile River, and they worshipped the sun, and they worshipped these different creatures. And by transforming those into plagues on Egypt, God shows his dominance over them and shows the impotence of their gods to protect them. And so the plagues show God's judgment on the false gods. It shows his superiority. It shows that he's the Lord of all the earth. as he judges the Egyptians for their sin. So that is really the heart of what's going on in these plague narratives. And so, as we've been talking about on Wednesdays, when we're reading in Revelation, and we see these plagues on the earth then that echo the plagues of Egypt, that's because there's a close correspondence between the two. That the plagues that are on the whole world are once again showing that our idols, the things that we would place our trust in instead of God, are unable to deliver us. That God alone is our fortress and our deliverer. That God alone is the one that we should turn to in times of trouble. And so that's really what has been going on with these plagues. Now, let me jog your memory just a little bit here. And I'll pull up a nice little graphic. Well, I thought I had one. This will be as effective as anything, I guess. Where'd my little chart go? All right. And then here I am. Okay. So you have the plagues are broken into three sets of three. The first plague, the first one here is the Nile River turned to blood, and then frogs all over the place, and then gnats. The second set of plagues here deals with flies, and then pestilence, and then boils on man and beast. The third set, you had destructive hail and lightning that wiped out the crops, and then locusts that defeated what was left, and then darkness that only affected the land of Egypt, darkness in the middle of the day. So the correlation here is that with the first plague and the fourth plague and the seventh plague, this first set, Moses appears before Pharaoh in the morning. Then Moses comes before Pharaoh. It's written slightly differently. And in the third set, Moses does not come, but just symbolically gestures. And so you see really something that kind of is reminiscent of the seals and the trumpets and the bowls in Revelation, that you have some repetition of the format, but it intensifies as it goes down the line. And again, these move from affecting everyone to only affecting the Egyptians. So the animal pestilence does not affect the animals of the Israelites. So the second four here, the second half here, these five don't. But the blood from the Nile River, the frogs, the gnats, the flies, that affects everybody. Flies sometimes translated lice. So that's kind of this progression that takes place here. So there are a lot of explanations. If you kept reading this in the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, it'll give you the kind of stuff you'll get on the History Channel, that, there was too much rain on the Nile River, and this washed down the red mud, and the red mud caused the fish to die, and then the fish dying made the frogs leave the banks, and all that. And so it kind of argues all of these things proceeded naturally because of this Nile flooding. I think the most polite thing that I can call that is goofy. It's goofy because it comes down to the point that Moses talks to Pharaoh and says, "Pharaoh, when do you want the frogs to go away?" And Pharaoh says, "Well, tomorrow. One more night with the frogs." If these are things that are happening naturally and developing naturally, then gracious, there's no stopping. It just continues and continues. That this power that God has is that He causes these things to happen. And so if God used natural processes to prepare for the plagues he knew he was going to do, I guess that's fine. But when you move into a totally non-supernatural worldview by saying, well, this couldn't be because these kind of things don't happen, so God must have done this, it must just be a description of natural events, that just doesn't square with the biblical text. And so we can't buy that. But of course, the skeptics in our world sometimes are willing to believe anything sooner than they would believe the Bible. So that, I think, is a big deal. Okay, so now we're going to get started. The chapters that we're looking at tonight are Exodus 11, 12, we'll skip 13, and then 14, 15, and 16. These are so rich that I just really couldn't cut anything out when I was planning this, and so sorry. Let me get this over here, and I'm gonna blow this text up for you. And we're going to start in Exodus chapter 11, verse 4. As always, if you have any questions or anything, then please do not hesitate to let me know, and I will be happy to try and answer those for you. I say that, and as I say that, I remember that Sheldon asked a question on Wednesday night, and I thought, well, I'll come back and answer that later, and I have not. So I'm sorry, Sheldon. I will do that. So here we're talking now about the description of the 10th plague. And Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts." So God says, look, I'm going to go out into the midst of Egypt. And that's a substantial deal here. Right? So I'm going to go out in the midst of Egypt. And he says, and when I do, all the firstborns will die. And he intensifies this, I think, really drastically. He says that he is going to, that they're going to die from the firstborn of Pharaoh all the way down to the firstborn of the slaves. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to get the footnotes to go away. Okay. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant. So from the top of the ladder to the bottom of the ladder. And even further, the firstborn of all beasts, even the animals of the Egyptians, are going to be affected by this plague. He says, and there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. Now this phrase, great cry, ought to draw our attention, and I don't want to downplay the sheer human suffering that lays behind it. You're talking about people in the middle of the night waking up and finding the firstborn of every single family dead. Can you imagine the cry of grief? But we'd read about a cry before. Back when Moses went to the burning bush, God said that there was a great cry, that the nation was crying out before him, and so he was going to come down and deliver them. So in response to the cry of the Israelites, God comes down and causes the cry of the Egyptians. And this is hard for us in our modern mindset because we want to make everybody get along and make everything kind of simple and neat, and everybody lives happily ever after. But biblically, the reason that Christians can have a turn the other cheek, pacifistic type attitude is because we know that there is judgment. God doesn't say, don't repay the evildoer for yourself because sin shouldn't be punished. God says, don't repay the evildoer. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. And so one of the reasons that we as Christians can let people mistreat us is because we know that we can entrust ourselves to the one who judges righteously. It makes me think even of a passage we looked at recently in well, maybe we haven't looked at it yet. I'm sorry, it's all blending together for me. In the law, so I guess we haven't looked at it yet. In the law, when God is describing the regulations, he says, don't be partial to the poor or to the rich. He says, don't condemn an innocent person, because I, the Lord, see and will avenge. Basically, it's a paraphrase. It's in Leviticus. And so what God is saying there is that don't condemn someone who might be innocent. It says because what we have built into our society, that the burden of proof has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, that our system is set up that it's better to let the wicked go than to punish the innocent. God says that too, and he says it's because he is the one who will judge. He says those people that are wicked will not escape. The people who are wicked are not going to get off. Rather, God says, I'll judge. He says, so do your best. It is the job of the government to punish the evildoer and defend the righteous, reward the good, and punish the evil. He says, but ultimately, if it's not clear, he says, I don't want you to condemn the innocent because I will repay. And so here, the Israelites have been being oppressed by the Egyptians for a long time. They've been in Egypt for 400 years. I don't think we can say exactly how long they were slaves in Egypt, how quickly after the death of Joseph things took a turn for the worse. But what we can say, I think with total certainty, is that they had been severely mistreated. In fact, you remember that Pharaoh, fearing an uprising, had killed all of the Egyptian baby boys. Not just the firstborn, all of them. And so now God responds in a sense in kind, although a lesser degree, and says, yes, all of Egypt will suffer, that the blood of all of these Hebrew boys will be repaid when the firstborn dies. And he says, and the Israelites will be spared. The Israelites will escape as God's own firstborn. So one of the things that's interesting that develops in Exodus that we're not going to spend much time on is this idea that every firstborn was taken that night, but that the firstborn of the Israelites were taken for God's service, while the firstborn of the Egyptians were taken in judgment. So later on, God will make a trade with the Israelites. He'll say, you can have your firstborns, and in exchange, I will redeem them because the Levites will be mine. And that's the great exchange that takes place that creates this priestly caste. So God is saying that there is, in response to the cry of the Israelites, the great cry of the Israelites because of their suffering, now there is a great cry of the Egyptians because of their judgment. There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. He says, but against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue, against man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. The distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites is not their character, it's not their ethnicity, it's God's difference. It's God puts a distinction between them. And he says it will be so complete, the Israelites will escape totally unscathed. They will not be hurt by the destroyer that will kill the firstborn of every Egyptian, but rather a dog won't even growl at them as they walk out. They walk out in peace. And all these thy servants shall come down unto me and bow down themselves unto me, saying, get thee out, and all the people that follow thee. And after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in a great anger. Never saw him again, of course. Pharaoh said to Moses, the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, so that he would not let the children of Israel go out of his land. So what we see, our big idea for Exodus 11, because Israel cried out for mercy, Egypt cried out in agony. That's a tough line, but I think that it is correct. I think it is correct. They in response to their wickedness in response to their sin, God answered the prayer for justice. God answered the prayer for deliverance from his people. And to do that required judgment. I think it's tough, but it's true. Exodus 12 now. God went out before his justice to rescue those under the blood. Ah, now this is good. This is really good. Look with me in Exodus 12:12. God says, look, you're going to have this holiday. It's going to be the Passover. You're going to take a lamb, the 14th day of the month. You'll kill the lamb in the evening. You'll take the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts where you'll eat it. You'll roast it with fire. You won't break any bones. You won't let anything remain until morning. You'll keep it in your household. You'll eat it standing up with haste. He says, because you expect that you've got somewhere to go when this is over. He says, for I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. So I've been telling you this already, right? That the plagues are not just isolated plagues, that they are geared to pass judgment on the gods that the Egyptians worshipped, to show their weakness and to show God's superiority. Now, who was the ultimate god of Egypt? Well, who was the ultimate source of every idol? It wasn't the Nile River that demanded to be worshipped. It was human beings that, although they knew God, rejected that knowledge and chose to worship the creature rather than the creator. And so, finally, the ultimate god in Egypt was Pharaoh. They worshipped Pharaoh as a god incarnate. And as they worshipped Pharaoh, and as they worshipped all these contraptions of human ingenuity, God says, I'm now ultimately going to attack mankind itself. I am the Lord. And of course, you remember that was Pharaoh's question. Who is the Lord that I should obey him? God says, I am going to pass through the land of Egypt this night. I will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. God says, I'm going to come, and I'm going to do it myself. Of course, that reminds us of Revelation again, where Jesus says, I'm going to come riding on a white horse with the sword of his mouth. He's going to slay his enemies. God says that ultimately, for these moments of redemption on which all of history turns, God says, I am going to accomplish this in my own strength, in my own way. Is intrusional ethics is what it's called. That although God's normal pattern for us is mercy and to turn the other cheek and common grace, that at these key moments he uses a temporarily withholds the mercy that he's temporarily providing, and he shows the severity of sin so that others might turn, so people will know who he is. I'm the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. So what's interesting to me, and I mean, this is so great. God says, I will pass over you. Of course, that's where the holiday of Passover comes from. It says, when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague will not be on you to destroy you. God says, I'm going to come in, and I'm going to smite each house, and the firstborn in each house is going to die, but I'm going to skip your houses. But now let's get down a little bit further. He says, you'll keep this holy day, this whole week-long festival of unleavened bread. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel, and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families, and kill the Passover. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin. This is interesting, isn't it? He doesn't say to paint it, right? This word strike, if we were to do a little bit of Hebrew word study, which we are, so stick with me for just a second. I hope you can read this chart. In the Dictionary of Biblical Language Hebrew, a famous Hebrew lexicon, it says this word means to touch, to strike, driven back, level, plagued, inflict, be plagued, befall. You see, these are pretty tough words to drive.
Naga.
Naga, see. The Now you've got, it's translated toucheth or touch, and then smote, plagued, reach. It's got all these different translations, but the basic meaning is to touch, to make contact, right? To hit. Now, it can mean to just touch. I mean, it doesn't have to mean strike violently, but I think oftentimes that meaning is in there. So when we come here and he says, you'll take a bunch of hyssop, you say, what's hyssop? It's a useful thing too about a computer. Marjoram. Hyssop. Here's your picture of hyssop from the New Manners and Customs of the Bible. And you see this leafy shrub. It was used for several different sacrifices, but we are not 100% sure that this is the same plant used in biblical times, but they do think it's the marjoram, I don't know, that used for cooking and as an aromatic thing. But you can see it's leafy, right? And so if you imagine they dip the blood in it and strike the doorposts with it, and they used it to sprinkle the scroll with it, and it was used as part of the ritual for cleansing lepers. David says in Psalm 51:7, "Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean." It's this powerful picture here. Here's a real picture. That'll be nice instead of just a diagram. Maybe it'll be nice if it'll work. Biblical pictures. There we go. Okay. Can you see that? Maybe you can. There. You see that? You see that? It's just a bushy, leafy thing. And so God says, take these and dip these in the blood and then strike. And do you get that picture? It's upside down, right? So if you imagine now, okay, you've got the lintel on the two sides of the door, so you strike the top and strike the bottom. But can you imagine if someone is on a cross and you drive between their feet and drive between their hands? That you strike, strike, strike. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. So it's helpful to kind of get this picture that it's this bush of plant. So it's not like they didn't do it with their hands or with a paintbrush. They grabbed a handful of this leaf, these branches, and dipped it, and then 1, 2, 3, right, struck it. Because the blood was struck on their doorposts, God did not strike them. And I just think that's pretty incredible. The blood's in the basin. None of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. Now, verse 23 it's one of those times where I just feel like most people must read the Bible entirely too fast. Or too slow, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure what's worse. Read it in a way that we don't understand it. It says, "For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and upon the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door, and will not suffer the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you." Now this is a subtly different meaning of Passover, right? Because before, God used Passover like, I'll skip over. I'll come past your house and I'll skip your house. But now, he says, I'll pass over like my hand is passing over my face, like blocking it. You see that? God is saying here that he, earlier in the chapter, will skip those houses that are marked by the blood. Here he says that he will come between the destroyer and the house that's marked with blood. He'll pass over in the sense of blocking. It reminds us of in Genesis 14, was it? Where God said, "Fear not, Abraham, I am your shield and your exceeding great reward." I'm your shield. I'm the thing that takes your arrows. In Isaiah, it says, "In all their afflictions he was afflicted." We know that God passes over us in judgment, but that doesn't mean that the judgment that we deserve for our sin was just withheld, just ignored. It means rather that our judgment struck Jesus instead of us, that Jesus came between us and the bullet. Jesus came between us and the freight train, that he took it on himself. So when I see the blood, I will pass over you, I'll skip over you. But the way that he does that is that when I see the blood, I become the barrier, I become the thing that comes between you and the destroyer. God went out before his justice to rescue those under the blood. He went out and comes in between his justice, that he's holy and that he claims those firstborn and that he punishes the Egyptians. And yet he says, for those that are under the blood, which we read as a mixed multitude, right? For those that were under the blood, God says, I come between you and the destroyer. I will not allow the destroyer to touch you. I don't know. Is that too subtle? Are you following me on this? I'm just going to have to trust that you are, because I can't see your faces. But this is one of the neatest things to me, one of the most powerful pictures of Christ in the Old Testament. Now, after his people had been rescued by the blood, now it was time for them to go through the water, right? Exodus chapter 14. And verse 10 is where we'll pick up. So the Passover does happen. They leave. They plunder the Egyptians. People are just giving them stuff, saying, get out of here. Pharaoh, though, comes to his senses and says, now I'm mad. I'm sure not going to let them leave now. And so he, after telling Moses to leave, changes his mind, and the Egyptian army chases them. God doesn't lead them out through the hard road. Instead, he says, I'm going to take you through the Red Sea. Now, he's leading them with a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So, and we skipped over it, but in Exodus chapter 13, Moses took the bones of Joseph, for he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry my bones away hence with you. They get Joseph's bones that were embalmed 400 years earlier. They take the mummy of Joseph and take it with them to the promised land. It came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that way was near. For God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. Since they're not ready to go through the land of the Philistines, so God leads them through the wilderness instead. And they follow out there. Now then, in chapter 14, the Egyptian army is following. God says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. Surely you've seen this expression enough times now that you will never read the book of Exodus again without it hitting you. Pharaoh says, who's the Lord that I should obey him? And God says, let me show you. And they did so. And it was told that the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people. And they said, why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? And he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with a high hand. With a high hand means defiantly, like not something they're doing in secret. So high-handed sin in the Old Testament is sin for which there is no sacrifice, because it's not something you slipped into. It's something that you did defiantly, proudly. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Well, that's how the Israelites leave Egypt. They don't sneak out. They go out with a high hand. Say, our God is with us. I don't have time in this study to talk about God hardening Pharaoh's heart versus Pharaoh hardening his own heart. But let me just sum it up with the same idea that we find in Romans 1, that they chose sin and God gave them over. God said, okay, have it your way. And so I think that's the heart of it. If that's something I'd like to at some point come back and do a study on and spend some time talking about, but doesn't fit well into a chapter a day of the Old Testament. The Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea, beside Pi-hahiroth, beside Baal-zephon. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes. And behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it is better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. They say, What have you done? Why have you brought us here? All these miracles and this pillar of fire and this pillar of cloud. You did all this stuff just for us to die here. We would rather be slaves than die. Their mentality was quite different than ours, maybe. Or maybe not. And Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, I did it again. The Egyptians who you see today, you'll see no more forever. Oh, okay. Susan says this, I know you said you didn't have time, but does that mean Pharaoh had no choice in his actions? I don't think so. But let's talk about what does that mean? And this is tricky, right? It's extremely tricky because the Bible says that there's none that seeks after God. There's none that does good, right? And so on our own bent, if we're just unleashed to do what we want, then in our natural state, that's sin, sin, sin. Now, God restrains us, and God gives us what's called common grace. God gives common grace to teach parents to love their children and to protect us and to sends his rain on the just and the unjust. And so that's common grace. That's God saying you go ahead and experience less than you really want. So remember, even when we've studied in Revelation, I tried to suggest that the 7 seals are not even direct judgments from God as much as they are God letting us deal with the consequences of our own actions. God just starts to remove some of the restraints that he's put on us. So when we come to Romans 1 here, toward the end, he says, For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold or suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them, right? God shows it to them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So God has given all of humanity the information they need to know who he is. He certainly gave Pharaoh all the information he needed to know who he was. Who he was. Emphasis is wrong there. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. So they knew God, they had enough awareness to know who God was, but they wouldn't glorify him as God. They weren't thankful, but they became vain in their imaginations. And the word vain is almost a technical term for idols. in the Bible. That they follow after idolatrous fancies. And so their heart was darkened by their idolatries. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Now here's what we come into in verse 24. Wherefore, so because of this, God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who's blessed forever. Amen. So God gave them over to the lusts of their own hearts. And so we might even say, although I think this would be saying too much, but I think it goes in the right direction to say that when God hardens Pharaoh's heart, it's almost like God is less hardening it and more softening it. God says, okay, you have it your way. I am withdrawing the basic protection that I have given you from yourself. And so I will let you be as wicked as you want to be, so that you can choose, so that my glory can be shown in you and others might be saved. God says, I'll let you have the full cup of what you deserve. So God's not giving anyone less than they deserve. But most of the time we get so much better than we deserve that when God says, okay, I'll let you, you've made your choice, I'll let you have it, that it becomes a pretty different thing. So how about 2 Thessalonians chapter 2? Remember ye not that when I was with you I told you these things, and now you know it withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let, restrains will restrain, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish. Here it is. Because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So God sends them a strong delusion, right? God says, okay, I'll let you believe these lies that you've been telling yourself. And maybe strong delusion is the best way of putting it. So Pharaoh, even in under normal circumstances, even after he had chosen to reject God and chosen to reject God and chosen to reject God, probably by the 10th plague, out of sheer self-preservation, would have pretended to believe. So, he would have defended it, even while he's trying to lie to himself and convincing himself that it's untrue. And so God sends them strong delusion. That is, God enables them to believe the lie that they want to believe. They exchange the truth of the Creator for the creation, and so God says, I'll let you believe that. You want to turn aside, so I'll let you turn aside. And so I think that's what we see with the interplay between God hardening Pharaoh's heart and Pharaoh hardening his heart. And although I've already spent too much time on this, I think it is a really good question. So if we don't get the whole way through tonight, I think that's probably okay. Let's do a Bible search, and I want to do what's called a clause search, and I want to do in the book of Exodus. I want to look at this verb, and I want to find the places that the verb harden is used in the book of Exodus. And so let's click here. Okay, it's only giving it to me in this one place. So let me instead use the Hebrew lemma. I know this is strange, just trust me. so there's two, I think maybe verb, gloss, harden. No, okay. I need, okay, we'll use a less elegant method. It's not what I wanted to do because I really wanted to group it differently. But I bet I can actually still do this with analysis, huh? I say, huh, talking to myself. Okay. No. Okay, well, yeah, well, let me sort it by subject. All right. So let's just look at it. God says in Exodus 4:21, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Exodus 7:3, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Exodus 7:13, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. The Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. 7:22, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. When Pharaoh saw there was respite, he hardened his heart. Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pharaoh was hardened. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardened his heart, he and his servants. The heart of Pharaoh was hardened. God says, I have hardened his heart. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. And behold, I will harden the heart of the Egyptians. Now, it's a little bit misleading because obviously these are all grouped in single chapters and single discourses. But you notice, God says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. But chronologically, we see God hardened Pharaoh's heart in chapter 7, verse 13. And then in 14, he says Pharaoh's heart is hardened. It doesn't say who hardened it. And the same in 22. Now in 8:15, Pharaoh hardened his heart. And then Pharaoh's heart is hardened in 8:19 when he sees the miracle. He says, this is the finger of God, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also in 8:32. I mean, that seems to imply, that it wasn't just this time that he hardened his heart, that he's chosen continually. And then in 9:34, he hardened his heart. So as we work through these different examples, sometimes it just says his heart was hardened and doesn't tell us who. Sometimes it says Pharaoh hardened his heart. It's not like some people imagine that the first half, Pharaoh hardened his own heart and then God hardened his heart. It's this complex interplay where Pharaoh's given a chance and hardens his heart, and God says, okay, let me pour gasoline on this decision that you've chosen to make. And so he did have a choice, although I'll say too, what does Proverbs tell us? That he who often hardens his neck will find it suddenly broken, and that without remedy. That eventually you get so hard that you don't have any options. That you've sealed yourself. That once again makes me think of a Revelation 22. A lot of interaction between Exodus and Revelation. God says this, he that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. So I think what you're saying there is the same idea. God says, I will help you be who you are choosing to be. The 2 Timothy 3:13. In the last days perilous times will come, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Isn't that interesting? Evil men and seducers will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. I think that's what this strong delusion stuff is about, is when you put your mindset in that lying mode, you become vulnerable to believing what you want to believe. I think we see that in mundane stuff all the time. That once if you really want to believe something, then you can vacate all common sense from your brain, and in doing so, you can just seal yourself. So how about two more examples of this? Proverbs 4:18. The path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more into perfect day. The way of the wicked is as darkness. They know not at what they stumble. You see that? So the path of the just gets brighter and brighter. The path of the wicked gets darker and darker until they don't even know what they're tripping over. And so I think that's what happens with Pharaoh, is God seals him in it. He says, have it your way. Okay, so I hope that's helpful, Sister Susan. I hope that's helpful to everybody, because I do think that's a big question people have as they read this. And if you make a little chart and kind of mark for yourself what we did briefly in that Bible search of how that interplay works, then I think you start to get this idea of how it's fit together. Okay, so Exodus 14, God parted the waters to bring his people out. He parts the Red Sea. Of course, that's a really clear picture of baptism. And so that was what I was going to say about that. Exodus 15 is what's called the Song of Moses. I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him a habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host he hath cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank to the bottom as a stone. Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. And in the greatness of thine excellency thou hast overthrown them that rose up against thee. So what I was going to talk about with this is that God, because he brings his people out, he stands out from all the nations. And his sister Miriam leads the people in worship as well. So the women follow out after her, and they sing a song here. It just gives the beginning. Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he hath thrown into the sea. Certainly it seems like that probably means that she sang the whole Song of Moses with them. Now, chapter 16, then, the final text we have today was the picture of manna that God provided for his people when he brought them out. So we'll talk about this, that God didn't give them more than they needed. He gave them each day their daily bread. It was like wafers made with honey. He said, gather every morning what you need. On the Sabbath, gather twice what you need. The day before the Sabbath, gather twice what you need, because you won't be able to gather on the Sabbath. If you gather too much, then it will rot. If you, so gather exactly what you need for the day. You can't store it up ahead. Every morning you have to get it fresh. I think there are a lot of spiritual lessons we learn from manna. There are a lot of things you can't cram, a lot of things you can't stockpile. God says he gives it to us. His mercies are new every morning. And so I think that's important to us as well, that the spiritual nourishment we need, you can't say, well, I read the Bible a lot last year. Now I'm okay. God, brings us to this point where every day he gives us what we need. I think that's an important physical lesson too. The man that stockpiled and filled his barns until he needed barns for his barns, God said, you fool, tonight your soul is required of you. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Give us this day our daily bread. Give me neither poverty nor riches, is what the psalmist says. And so I think that there's a lot that we can learn from a little thing of manna. And so we will talk about that too. And look up coriander seed if you don't know what it looks like, because that's what it says manna looked like. All right, so that's it. It's 7:03. If you have any other questions, anything I can do to help, then please let me know. Stay warm, stay dry. Throw snowballs at each other if we get snowballs. Don't throw sleet at each other. They're little hail pellets. And we will see you soon. I'm sorry that I've already kept you over, but God bless you, and have a fantastic evening.
Lost or saved, find their way at the sound of your great name. All condemned, feel no shame.